BIMM is proud to introduce Mr. Suresh Raman, who is the Global Head HR of Birlasoft. He is responsible for managing the entire HR function and supporting implementing overall talent management, learning and leadership development strategy. Sir is a management graduate from Symbiosis Pune, SIBM batch of 89 with bachelor's in science and law. Sir has overall 23 years of varied experience in field of HR across multiple industry verticals. His rich experience and significant contributions in transformation management and change processes has enabled him to carve out a distinct place for himself in this domain. Some of Sir's key accomplishments include creating the world-class Talent Support Center in India, Leadership Academy for Leadership Development, compensation strategy and benefits administration, and creating a sourcing center of excellence. Sir has 3 startup organizational experience to his kitty. Sir has worked in organizations like Deloitte, GMR Group, RPG Enterprises, K. Rahejas, SSI Technologies, IMR Global at senior levels before his current assignment in Birlasoft. He has in past successfully led talent acquisition, talent development, talent management, operations, delivery, and total rewards in some of the country's most reputed organizations, as mentioned earlier. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. The podium is all yours.
Thank you, lady, for a great introduction. Thank you, Bala, for inviting me to your institute for a difficult topic to be speaking on. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much to see you and being part of this institute for this great occasion of your 14th National HR Meet. The theme or the topic which is given is challenges in the changing business environment. The current business environment is quite volatile, unpredictable, very fluid, extremely dynamic. So it's a little difficult for us to kind of forecast our businesses or try and make some plans for a short term, long term, as it used to be in the past, in the current scenario, of many reasons. Now, if you try and look at some of those challenges, it is nothing new that I'm going to talk. I think you had a full day session yesterday and you had an half day session today. You will have a few more sessions today as well, and then tomorrow. Now, the challenges that I have categorized them into 3 different buckets. One is business related. The other one is people related. The third one is governance. So those are the 3 buckets that I'm going to actually touch upon from a challenge standpoint. Now, obviously, a business is not doing well, at least in the IT sector that I belong to. I'm sure that all of you read newspapers. Yesterday's morning newspaper spoke about Eurozone going for a second recession in less than 4 years. So 2009 was the first recession for Eurozone. The second recession just started, which means that the effect of this second recession will be there for about 2 years. So what are we going to do? Business, because 65% of our Indian IT business is based on the US client and 35% rest of the world. And out of which I think about 22% from Europe. How do we conduct business? How do we employ our current workforce? How do we go to institutes like yours and recruit people for future employment? So there are a lot of challenges, but from a business standpoint, I'm going to talk a few things. One is on the business uncertainty that I spoke about. What will be the next tragedy of our revenue coming from? Where are the source of our business? If recession in the existing business are not going to grow, second, the new business are not going to come, how do you run your organization with a workforce of roughly 1.25 crores in the IT sector? There's a lot of questions around the economic uncertainty because the whole industry is not dependent on the local opportunity, but heavily dependent on US, Europe, Asia Pacific regions for business. So therefore, any any challenge on the economic front in these countries will always affect the domestic IT industry. The input costs have gone high, largely. The operation cost is highly increasing day by day. The growth is, in some sector, it is negative. In some sector, it is actually flat. In some sector, it is marginal growth. And therefore, your pressure on cost is very high. The FTE cost, which is the resource cost, is actually growing year after year. The expectation from clients in terms of value for the investment is quite high, and the quality should be better than what you delivered in the past. So if you look at these 5 parameters on one hand, which are highly demanding, as opposed to the business not growing, you are not able to match your business in terms of growth and looking forward to what you wanted to do over a period of time. So therefore, there are challenges on the economic uncertainty. Lack of effective innovation. Now, when I talk about lack of effective innovation, I think we need to invest a lot of money for R&D. You need to invest a lot of money for innovation. You need to invest a lot of money for product development, technology interventions. All that is lacking today because your top line is not growing, your bottom line is actually shrinking. So you have two-folded effect in your business. Top line is not growing and bottom line is shrinking. Where do you have money to invest? Where is the question of having a group which is highly oriented towards innovation? So lack of innovation is another reason why you have so many challenges, because you are not able to compete with other players in the global scenario. Low growth, technology refresh. When I talk about lower growth, I just mentioned that either it is negative or it is flat or it is marginally growing. So there are tier 1 IT companies which have actually declared flat growth, negative growth, and marginal growth. And companies which have actually been able to forecast their year after year growth is not able to forecast today even for a quarter. That's the kind of uncertainty in the economy, not able to even forecast a quarter after quarter top line, bottom line growth. There are expectations from stakeholders and investors that in spite of the economic conditions, in spite of the business not growing, they would look at some value at the end of the year. What is the investment that I made and what is the ROI that I get out of that investment? So there is a lot of pressure on the governance model for people who run these organizations when the economy is not really doing well and innovation is lacking. There is no growth, flat growth, top line is not growing, bottom line is actually shrinking, and therefore what do? You will try and look at, there is something called business expansion and growth, which is basically M&A. When you acquire a company, you will actually think of 3. You will actually look at 3 things. One is that in the current business scenario, what is very similarly going to be the one that you actually see in the acquired company. So which means that if you are in the business of financial services, you will try and look at something in financial services, try and acquire. This is just to keep the top line growth. When you acquire a company, you will try and merge the top line for these 2 companies, one which is the current one and the acquired one. So therefore, a $150 million company and then you acquire a $20 million company, your top line is 170, theoretically. But your bottom line is not going to be growing the way you look at the top line. So even in a very difficult circumstances, when the business is not growing, you try and acquire a company which is in the similar kind of your business or in a technology framework in a similar kind of skill sets or technology that they actually work on. So therefore you try and look at them as a niche skill for your business, you try and acquire them. So this is merger and acquisition, and therefore you try and float lively in the industry, but not really making money, not really actually increasing your profitability. Then you have the organizational enablement, which means that you will have to bring everybody onto the same page, try and look at one direction for this organization, because we are in very difficult times from a business standpoint. So all of us need to think alike, look alike, and being the same. So therefore, it calls for extraordinary effort in terms of stretching our skills, in terms of being very patient, understanding client requirements, delivering more than what is required, and therefore all of us are in the same direction, at least during difficult times. So the ability to bring all the different components of an organization onto the same page and directionally going in the way that you want it to be, short-term, long-term, whatever, you can actually fix the time frame, is so important for the organization to stay afloat. There are a lot of issues these days on immigration and visa regulations. It is becoming tighter, it is becoming stricter in terms of scrutiny. So therefore, about a decade ago, it was easy for us to get a visa and go to one of these overseas countries and then stay put there, work, earn a lot of dollars, and increase your revenue and bottom line. Today, it is becoming extremely difficult. So therefore, multinationals and global organizations are finding it extremely difficult to recruit right skills, right talent in the countries that they operate. So that's becoming a difficult task in the current business environment. And the last one, from a business standpoint, is loss of experience. If you look at a normal unemployment percentage in the US today, is about 8%, but reality is a little more. Published figure is 8%, but this is only in sectors other than IT. IT and sectors which are related to IT, it is 0%. So which means that people keep moving across, and therefore there is a loss of experience in actually looking and moderating the growth of this industry. Movement clearly gives instability in the system, and therefore the growth gets affected. The second bucket that I was talking about is people. This is people-centric, and then you have a lot of challenges on the people front from a challenge standpoint in the current business environment. Managing talent is extremely difficult because expectations are mismatching. I'm sure that 2 years ago when one of your seniors was picked up from this institute, was paid X amount of money. Today, when you're being picked up from the campus, you would not look at X amount of money, you would look at least X plus 1. So therefore, the expectation is completely mismatching with the industrial and the individual organization growth. There are projects in the IT scenario, there are projects which are closing, no new business coming through. And then there are old technologies which are still currently working, and therefore you are not able to invest in the new technologies that is likely to give a lot of business in the market. You are not able to invest money, so therefore you are losing out on the technology front. It is important for you to manage the talent, otherwise your attrition will shoot up from the current level of 20% to 40%, 50%. Then hiring cost is the most difficult expense today in your balance sheet. It's increasing phenomenally. And when people know that as an organization your attrition is quite high, they bargain more, they negotiate more to get more money. So the cost of hiring is actually increasing, and that affects your bottom line directly. Developing leaders and allowing flexibility. Today it is important for us to make sure that people have work-life balance. You have some flexibility for people to operate from wherever they are. So in common parlance, it is called working from home or working from a location. And then you need to be very flexible there, otherwise people will not stay with you for a longer period of time. So in a difficult circumstances like today, where the economy is not doing well, the investments are very low, you are actually struggling with tier 1, the large players in the IT industry. You need to try and make sure that you have some change agents and change leaders in the system, who will actually preach, who will propagate, who will bring in those changes in the mindset of people that you have in the organization or in the system. So we as an organization, Birlasoft, we are embarked on a transformation which is called Birlasoft 2.0. As much as the Eurozone is in the second recession, US economy is definitely not doing well. We have our revenue to an extent of about 96% from these two geos. US and Europe, UK. So if this 96% is actually affected by the economic turbulence, how do we run our organization? It's a big question. So we said we'll have to create a transformation process. So we said we need to create some change leaders. We said we need to create some change agents within the system who will actually keep all our talent not going out of the system but staying afloat in the system and making sure that we don't actually commit too much of promises or too much of financial benefits, too much of career growth, but we stay when difficulty is imminent from a market standpoint. The second one is managing Gen X and Gen Y. I just gave an example that 2 years ago when we offered a campus recruit from Balaji Institute was X amount. Today I don't think you will accept an X amount of compensation to join any organization, irrespective of that organization is doing well or not doing well. So therefore, managing the Gen Y and beyond is a little difficult because they are heavily focused on their role and their compensation and the technology. At least first 5 years, they are not bothered about the brand that they are working for. It could be anything. They are only worried about what is the role that they play. To some extent, what is the title that they carry, what is the compensation associated with the title or the role, and what technology that they're working in. I mean, they wouldn't want to work in something like, IBM mainframe or AS400, which is all obsolete. They want to work in cloud computing. They want to work in latest technology, CRM solutions. Now, they want to work in mobile communications. Very difficult. I mean, if you don't work in those technology areas from a business standpoint, keeping those talent in your system is extremely difficult. Third one is value proposition. Everyone looks at the end of the day, what is in it for me? It could be Birlasoft, Infosys, Wipro, any organization. I don't care. What is in it for me at the end of the day? Because I am not associated with the brand. I am associated with myself. So in a difficult business environment, managing this talent is a very difficult task. And more so, 1 to 5 years of experience, they are extremely mobile. They don't stay in any organization for more than a year or two. I mean, including some of those trainees that we had recruited, they never stayed for more than 2 years. So it is a little difficult. They don't really see at the value proposition or a career as opposed to a job that they do, and therefore they are highly mobile. They don't stay in the same organization for more than 2-3 years, at least in the first 5 to 10 years. I mean, I'm saying that more so even at the 5 to 10 year bracket as well, not only 1 to 5, but slowly moving into 5 to 10 years as well. Balancing employee expectations and business reality. Again, I want whether you do your top line good or your EBITDA or your bottom line is growing or not, I don't care. I want my increment to be given. So therefore, higher pay. I want all the facilities to be given, transportation, subsidized meal or Sadaksa coupons, healthcare, insurance, annual get-together, project dinners, gym in the office complex. The only thing is that I don't think people have gone to the extent of asking for a swimming pool in the organization complex, but obviously they have asked for a gym, recreational facilities in the organization. So therefore, the demands from that, from the employee standpoint is highly increasing as opposed to the business growth, looking at the top line, bottom line. So managing that is becoming really difficult. The business reality is completely different. Now, 2 years ago, the client that we had was giving us a $18 per hour for a 3 years experience resource. Now today, that $18 has actually dropped to $16. There are multiple vendors. You've got tier 1, you've got tier 2, you've got tier 3. Everybody is a competitor. Everyone has technology. Everyone has a great resource pool. So that $18 had dropped down to $16, while this person 2-3 years ago, when he joined this organization, his salary was, compensation was X amount. Now it has gone X plus 3, X plus 4 amount. While the income is dropping, the expense is going high, the compensation is going high, the revenue for the organization is dropping down. How do you match? So therefore, it is extremely difficult. From a people standpoint, in a difficult situation like now, I mean, even the past year, 10, 11, 12, it is becoming more and more difficult. I'm sure that some of the elders who are seated here a decade ago or 2 decades ago, there used to be an annual general body meeting, which basically talks about balance sheet, top line, bottom line, how much of money this organization earned. And then at some point in time, they also had a special annual general body meeting for some issues, some concerns on the business. Then they started having a yearly review. Then they brought it down to 6 months review, which is half-yearly review. Then they brought it down to quarterly review. Then they brought it down to bi-monthly review. Now today, people are talking about monthly review, fortnightly review, weekly review, and sometimes daily review. That is the kind of environment we are conducting business today. So it is becoming difficult day by day. It is extremely challenging. On the one hand, you need to look at a client or a customer for business. On the other hand, you need to look at your internal systems and processes. And the third one, you have your own talent pool. Employee engagement and retention of top talent. Again, it is something related to what I spoke, but it is important. If you don't retain your top talent in the organization, you will not grow in your business. Because clients are becoming more and more smarter. They want more value for a lesser cost. They want a better quality. They also want better people to be in the system. So your top talent who are good will obviously get opportunities outside of your organization. So it is important for you to hold them. So how do you hold them? You will have to treat them. You'll have to treat them differently. You'll have to give them special projects. You'll have to have them put them on an incentive scheme. You will have to promise them some career growth. You'll have to give them some fantastic titles. Otherwise, that 20% of yours is actually running 80% of your business. So you need to be extremely careful holding them in the system. So those are the challenges from a people standpoint. Now the third one is governance. Now the pressure from business and the pressure from the talent folks that we have, or the force that you have in the organization, will obviously bring in a lot of pressure on your governance model. Policies and procedures. We used to be giving an increment of 20% 2 years ago. Now this past year we have brought it down to 6%. A lot of people left the organization. When you don't have that disposable income for your increments, obviously your increment rates will drop down. So interpretation and execution of policies is another very, very difficult task in difficult times. You have to be very transparent. You have to be very open. You have to share your organization information to everyone, because every employee is a stakeholder in your organization. You have multiple stakeholders. You've got clients on the one hand, you've got your own employees on the other, and you also have the other authorities and your investors. So you need to be extremely careful in what you communicate, why you communicate. Are you doing an appropriate communication at an appropriate time or not? These things ought to be taken highly, highly significant and important when you do that. But the more and more you are transparent, you are open, the more and more people will get to understand and stay with you, as opposed to not giving that information which is required, because everyone is smart today. It's not the boardroom review today. It's actually an organization review. Everyone is a stakeholder and everyone is interested in what kind of business are we in, including understanding quarterly review of top line, bottom line, profitability of the organization. Change is constant. Change is inevitable. If you don't change, you cannot conduct business. So obviously, anticipating change is important. So therefore, you will up your sleeves before something really falls into cracks. So what you do is that when you are trying to manage a global organization like Birlasoft, you need to be extremely careful about demographies. You need to be extremely careful about culture in those geos. You need to be extremely careful about the companies that you acquired as part of your overall game plan. You also need to be extremely careful about managing the global workforce. The behavior of the UK workforce is completely different from US, and the Asia Pacific is completely different from India. So you need to be cognizant of the behavioral pattern. You need to be cognizant of the psychology that is actually existing in the workforce. And based on that, you need to structure your governance model. And the last piece on the governance model is credibility of HR. It's important because if you had given a 15% promotion this past year and a 15% increase on their increment, and this year you're talking about business is not doing well, there is a recession in the US, our top line is not growing, our bottom line has shrunk. So therefore, we will not be able to give an increment of 15%. We are giving an increment of 5%. Now, there are people who join during the course of the year. Lateral hiring. Someone whom you have recruited from a great organization, tier 1 or multinationals. And you tell them that after you complete 1 year, you will get an increment. You will get a great increment. Now, it's going contrary. People don't believe you. So, HR is actually in trouble in terms of credibility. When you hire a person, you actually make some commitments. Not that you actually give it in writing, but you say that in the last year, we gave an increment of 20%. And we gave a 15% promotion, just to create a feel in the mind of the person who is joining you that this is a great organization to work with. And obviously, in the next year, you see the top line, bottom line actually not doing well. And a CEO tells you that, Suresh, you have only 5%. You'll have to play around with 5%. I will have to play around with 5%, that's all. So perception and reality. As an organization, we are doing well. But as an individual or as an employee, I'm not actually being treated well the way I used to be 2-3 years ago. Consistently, I was a rated 1 employee and I got a 20%, 25%. This past year, 18%. Today, Suresh, you are talking about 3% and 2%. In that 5%, I said 3% now, base, 2% end of the year, bonus. No, because the kitty is empty. You cannot do anything beyond that. So ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the current scenario of business, it is not only for the IT sector, I'm saying that it is across. The only sector I really want to look at in the next at least 10-15 years is manufacturing. Manufacturing is really, really growing. There's a lot of scope in manufacturing because in the 40s to 60s or late 70s, it was manufacturing, especially to automobiles and energy sector. And I think after that, the 70s, 80s, and part of 90s, we saw financial services and banking growing. And in the last 2 decades, it was IT and IT-related businesses. And I think we are going back to the cycle of manufacturing starting from 2015-16 timeframe. So that being said, what are we doing as an organization, Birlasoft? I just mentioned that we have moved into a transformation process in order to make sure that we stay afloat. Not that we wanted to be a great player in our business, but at least make sure that we have the current workforce in our system and we continue to do some, we continue to make some growth on the top line and some growth on the bottom line while we try and shrink our expenses in order to be there as an organization. We've been in the business for about 19 years. We continue to be in the business, but we'll have to do some major things. So we call that, all these 19 years, we call it as Birlasoft Transformation 1. And now we are moving into a Transformation 2.0, which is a new one. Now what have we done in this? We have looked at 4 pieces. One is strategically where you want to be. Today nobody talks about long-term objective of growing a business for 10 years. Nobody talks 10 years. There's no 10 years. And nobody even talks about 5 years. People are talking about 12 months to 18 months to 24 months. The economy is opening up in India. There's a lot of recession in the US. Eurozone is 0. So everything is going literally contradictory to each other in terms of looking at a global perspective of how this organization or the business is going to grow. So we looked at what we need to be strategically in the next 4 years. So we said 3 plus 1 or 1 plus 3. Then we looked at how strong you are commercially. So we looked at a commercial initiative, which is part of sales, marketing, and contract negotiation in all our deals. Third one is operational initiative. How do we make your operations cost effective and making sure that you deliver high quality to the client? And the fourth one, all of this will actually go back to an organization health. Now, any one of them, either you overdo or you're not doing well, it will affect the organization health, including attrition. So you need to be very sensitive to the organization health while you are embarking on some of the initiatives that you are talking about. I will just take you through for a few minutes. I think I still have another 15 minutes. Quickly on each of these initiatives. Strategic excellence, we want to be a service line specialist on focused target markets. Now we called it as 3 by 3 by 3. And we've been there in all over the planet, if you will. Because we are there in multiple technologies, we are there in multiple regions, we are there in multiple verticals. We said to ourselves that we need to be focusing on 3 by 3 by 3. What I mean by 3 by 3 by 3? We want to focus on 3 geos. US, UK, Europe, Asia Pacific. We don't want to do great business in India, Middle East and Africa. Not really doing as well, both on top line and bottom line. So we said we will focus on 3 geos. Then we said we will focus on 3 verticals: BFS, insurance and manufacturing. We will not look at anything else, which means healthcare, retail, telecom, all that we are not going to be part of our business, at least for the next 2 to 3 years. Then we said we will look at only 3 service lines. Where are you good in terms of technology? So we said we are highly capable in EAS, enterprise application services. Then we said we are very good in CAS, custom application services. Then we said we are extremely good in CRM solutions. Said these 3, great. And we've been getting project after project in these areas to an extent of about 85% as opposed to 15% coming from rest of the technology. So we said we need to consolidate. So that 3 by 3 by 3 is the strategic excellence or an initiative that we are embarked on, and we are actually working. We have done about 6 months. We are waiting for results. I think it is very positive as of now. Commercial excellence. If you need to renegotiate, go back to your contract, go back to your clients, you need to renegotiate. I just gave you an example that $18 dropping down to $16, 3 lakh of salary moving on to 20 lakhs of salary. How do you match this? How do you run an organization going forward? I'm talking about one resource. Imagine if you have that kind of a pool of 2,000, 3,000 resources. Where is your EBITDA that you are talking about? Where is your profitability that you are talking about? While your growth can happen marginally, 150 million to 170 million, 10%, or 180 million to 198 million, 10% growth year after year. But bottom line, ROI for an investor, you're in trouble. So how do you make your projects or your business profitable? You will sustain in the business, and therefore you will have to look at your sales operating model. That's commercial excellence. It's sales, marketing, and commercial negotiations. Operation excellence is basically cost. How do you look at your cost reduced across multiple channels? Not only reducing your increment or employee benefits, but basically talking about how do you reduce cost, increasing your efficiency, increasing your utilization, increasing a span of control, and there are expenses which are associated with your projects. How do you make them, how do you correct them and make sure that you're not overspending there as opposed to what is required, base minimum. Organization health, it is important. You will have to make sure that all your associates stay in the system. You need to develop them. You need to give them a career as opposed to a job that they're currently in. You also need to draw a plan for them, how they are going to be futuristic or transforming leaders for your business to grow. Today, if you're a $200 million and if you want to become a $500 million, how do you make sure that you groom leaders within your system as opposed to hiring leaders from the marketplace? Then the last one is that while your bottom is not growing, it is important for you to grow your top lines, and therefore you get onto some partnership, you will do some merger and acquisition. I spoke to you about why do you make merger and acquisition? Because you want to increase your top line, you want to increase the area where you are pretty strong from a market standpoint, and therefore you go and acquire some of those niche organization where you think the investment is not too high. For a $200 million company, you may look at a $20 million, $30 million company, which is highly niche, having some clients, strong clients, and having a top line, bottom line. Little deeper onto strategic excellence, when I spoke about 3 by 3 by 3, the service line creation is very important. I said, if you want to be a very strong SAP player or an Oracle R12 player, you need to be focusing heavily there, as opposed to distributing a skill set and workforce across multiple technologies. So therefore, you're not consolidating. The client is clearly looking at you as opposed to tier 1 competitors from a deal perspective. So it is important when you bid, you are equally as good as the tier 1 or better than the tier 1 in that area of your operation or technology. It's very important. Otherwise, tier 2, tier companies, tier 3 companies will actually vanish after some time. The tier ones will actually eat away the tier 2 and tier 3 companies because they're very powerful. They're pretty strong in the technology. They have a lot of bandwidth in terms of workforce. These companies, the smaller ones, will not be able to have so much of people on bench to offer. Based on the need, we'll have to recruit and make sure that we have adequate strength to service the client. So it is a chicken and egg situation, but it is extremely difficult to compete with the tier 1 companies. Solutions development, you need to be extremely strong in what solutions, and I spoke about cloud computing, I spoke about CRM solutions, and I also spoke about the internet application, the mobile communications. Internet application and mobile communication is also a growing area. So you need to be extremely clear on where you want to be, where do you want to invest your dollars, and make sure that you grow in that segment in order to be a player over a period of time, which is about 2 to 3 years, not really 5-10 years, too long. New logo acquisition, you cannot run your organization with the current or existing clients year after year. You need to go and acquire new logos. You'll have to hit new clients or new customers. It's not easy because you have to have a lot of hunters. You have to have a lot of hunters in the system to go and get new logos, while the farmers in the current account will have to actually grow the current ones. Even if it is marginal, if you're not growing the current one, and if you're not able to get new logos, you're sunk. You're not growing. So you're in trouble. So these two will have to go hand in hand, but more so with the new logo. Because the current ones will not give you a 20% growth or a 30% growth. It will give you a 2%, 3% marginal. While the contracts are being renegotiated and the client is actually pushing you to a corner to reduce the rates. I gave you an example of 18 to 16. Yeah, the existing account growth is the forming which I am talking about. In our context, GE is a great client for us. They give us about 55% of the business. And the non-GE segment is not really growing. So our focus is to make sure that we try and get some new logos, but continue to do business with GE and move from that 55% to about 65% in the coming year. Commercial excellence, lead generation is a lever that we looked at. We'll have to have a very healthy pipeline. I don't know how many of you really get to understand from an IT scenario. If you have a $100 million pipeline, your conversion is less than 10%. Not even 10 million. Standard. So if you have to increase your business from a 200 million to a 300 million, assuming 100 more million, you will have to have at least 2 billion pipeline. So imagine how many lead generation you need to create. Half of them will not even reach the RFP stage. Half of them will not even call you for a shortlisting. So it is extremely difficult. There are so many vendors in the market. There are so many IT organizations. 23 years ago when I was a student in Pune, and today when I come back and see Pune, the old Pune is non-existent. Things have changed. There are so many organizations, there are so many institutes, there are so many schools, there are so many IT companies, there are so many manufacturing organizations, brands have changed. So everything is growing. So the competition from an industry standpoint is actually growing day by day by day. And everyone is smart. Believe me, everyone is smart. And everyone has that resource strength. Everyone has money, everyone has talent, and everyone has infrastructure to run an IT organization today. So it's important to generate a lot of leads if you are to compete with strong vendors from a market standpoint. Key account managers, this is called CAM. CAM account is that the current ones where you have grown well for a considerable period of time. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, very strong account. I think you need to focus more. Because you have demonstrated your capability as a great vendor for them or a great service provider. They have lived with you for 4 or 5 years. They understand your strengths. So in order to make sure that they stay with you, you will not allow another vendor to come in, and therefore you actually become stronger and stronger. So CAM account is very important to stay in the business. The Infosys, the Wipros, and the TCS of the world, they have very powerful CAM accounts numbering it about 50 to 100. And that's how they make so much of money. And there are companies who have believed in these tier 1 companies right from the first IT initiative to today, which is the relationship is running into 15 years, 20 years time frame. Deal pursuit and bid management, you need to, your qualification of bid, your terms and conditions of your bidding has to be extremely competitive, both in terms of quality and quantity. Quantity is the pricing that you actually give in each of those contracts. You need to be extremely smart. See, today, any client will always look at not less than 4 to 5 vendors, strong vendors. And then if you're not in those 4 to 5 lists, you're completely gone. And within that 4 to 5, you have to be extremely careful, one, on the qualification, second, on the quality of service you give, third, on the rate card that you provide, fourth, the resource pool that you have. So it is extremely tight. It is difficult. It is becoming tighter and tighter. It is becoming difficult and difficult to be there. And at the end of the day, the client has an option of not giving this contract to any one of these vendors, saying that there is no investment this year, we got our budgets and therefore we are not doing anything. So investment is becoming a big problem from a client standpoint. Pre-sales and solutions, you have to make a differentiator. If Infosys is saying that we are giving the solution and Birlasoft, a choto-moto company going and fighting with Infosys, you have to make a clear differentiation of what you offer. So your pre-sales and support is extremely important of what value you create to the client, at what cost, and how long is important. That will help the client to make a final decision of giving that contract to you or XYZ, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Deal structure and pricing. Pricing is very important because even $1 change in your rate card or your pricing will actually, make you not win the contract. The other vendor will win and go. How far you can squeeze yourself from a $18 to $16 to $14. Your gross revenue is X amount. Your gross margin cannot drop drastically. Then you will incur a loss by having a project. And there will be a lot of escalations. Once you start, executing a project, there are a lot of escalations. If it's a long-term project, 3 years, 5 years, you will bleed. You will actually incur loss in the system. So you need to be extremely careful. But you also need to be careful on not quoting $1 more than your competitor. There are 5 of you in the shortlist. The next piece is terms and conditions, T's and C's. There's a lot of revenue leakage on a contract which you sign with a client, and in reality, the realized money, the realized dollar at the end of each month, there is a gap, there is a difference, and therefore you tend to lose a lot of money. We call them as revenue leakage. So your T's and C's have to be extremely carefully drafted, vetted by your solicitor or your lawyer or your legal department before you finally sign with the client. Sales performance management, which is basically sales folks, unless you motivate them, you give them, you should have a good scheme of incentives, performance bonuses, they will not stay in your system because they know they stay for about 6 months and they will know that it is extremely difficult to crack clients in this region, in Bay Area of US. For our technologies, I'm not finding out any great clients, so they will move into an Infosys or a TCS operating in that environment. So you have to be extremely careful in drafting some good incentive schemes and making sure that they are motivated to stay in the system. Operation excellence, it is extremely important. I think I can very boldly quote today, we are one of the best utilization company from an employee standpoint. We are at 83.2%, which is an industry benchmark. The average is about 73 to 76. The tier 1s are doing at 74, 75. We are currently doing at 83.3 consistently between April and now. And I think we look forward to actually increasing that by a percentage. So how did this happen? This happened because our recruiting is on time. Our talent bank, which is the bench, I mean in IT concept it is called bench. We have minimum numbers in our talent bank. We have hired external vendors on cross-skilling and upskilling, which means that people who are in the talent bank, in the current technologies that they own, understand, we have actually trained them in a newer technology, in a different technology, where the business is growing. So cross-skilling and upskilling in those technologies and making sure that the customer interference is minimum. Because there are customers, there are GE clients who wanted to interview candidates, who wanted to interview the team lead or the project lead before he or she is given an offer letter. So that we need to minimize. All of that we had done at a very concerted effort and made sure that we are one of the best from a utilization standpoint. Span of control is basically structuring an organization. You cannot have senior members or experienced resources in your project team because their cost is huge, their benefits are huge, as opposed to somebody who is 1 year, 2 years, and you have a 4 year, 5 year. So you need to have more of less experienced people and less of more experienced people. You should have a combination of that in order to have a fine structure of each of these projects. If you run 140, 150 projects, it is extremely important that you go back and forth because people leave the project. Projects will get closed. People will get reallocated to new projects. So you need to go back and forth and make sure that you have a complete control on the span. Contractor replacement, you have to reduce contractors on site. It's basically overseas in the US, UK. The contractors' compensation in these areas are extremely high. And when you have H1 visas, L1 visas for your people in India, you try and actually, move them from the base location to one of these locations where the cost is lower. Communication cost, which includes transportation and other employee-related and organization-related costs, we need to try and trim them in order to stay in the business. So some amount of attention required in those areas. Offshore support cost, basically non-billable resources. Billable resources are the people who are in projects. Then you have non-billable resources like the HR, finance, sales support, marketing support, systems, and then you have business excellence, quality. All of them fall into a non-billable category. So you need to make sure that your cost on all these is optimized, so therefore not a huge cost for this. Wherever there is an opportunity or there is a probability or there is a genuinity or there is a need, you need to try and make sure that you have a very thin structure in the support groups. Then offshore support, when you're doing that trimming in the offshore support, which is basically more as opposed to on-site, you have to try and make sure that you don't need to have 3 different HR people working in the same center in the US as opposed to 1 or 2 managing and actually doing a lot of work into the offshore center. Today it's a virtual world. You can do HR from wherever you want to. You can actually sit in Pune or in a rural area. If you have connectivity, you can do HR from wherever you want. So you don't need to necessarily have a person in the location where you're operating from a business standpoint. Those are all operational related. Organization health, all of these will fall into a major and a big constituent called organization health. It's so important that if your health is not good, you will not be, as a person, your health is not good, then you're not free enough to be productive. So similarly, when you look at an organization, if the organization health is not good, then all the effort that you're talking about, commercial, operational, strategic, merger and acquisition, all of that is not going to yield you any benefit at the end of the year. So you need to be extremely careful and pay a lot of attention, invest a lot of dollars, take your people through a lot of good training programs and make them leaders for future. And therefore it is important to look at your organizational health. There are 9 dimensions in an organizational health index. Direction is the organization direction where we are heading towards in the next, I told you already, 5 years, 10 years is nobody's take today. Even senior level people, the CXOs are not willing to look at beyond a 3-year assignment. So we need to look at a 12-month, 18-month, 24 months. So where are we, what we want to be in the next 12 months, and where we want to be in the next 2 years. That's all. So that's one strategy. Direction, external orientation. You want to be in this area of business, or you want to look at acquiring a few companies, or you want to completely change your verticals. If you're in banking and insurance, why you should stay in banking and insurance? You knock that off. Let's move on to manufacturing, which is a growing industry. Capability. What are you capable of? Why are you fighting with Infosys and Wipro? You are capable of doing only this much. You try and consolidate where you are. You try and bring in that extraordinary skills that the other two don't have, or they have but minimal. And that is where you grow. If you're going to a client like GE, and obviously Infosys is there, Wipro is there, TCS is there, and Birlasoft is there, you know where their skills are. You will have to leverage the ones that they don't have. You try and create that and be a contender in your future projects with them. Leadership, obviously, you'll have to create leaders at every level. Team leader, project manager, and blah, blah, blah. There are multiple designations and titles. You need to have leaders at all levels. Coordination and control, that you need to be seeking a lot of support from the other constituents in the organization, other functions in the organization. Extremely important to run your score on the organization health front. Motivation, I don't need to give an explanation on motivation. You're all management students. Culture and climate. Culture and climate is a little connotation. Now, if you want to grow your top line and you're not able to organically grow your business today, and if you're going for an inorganic path and try and look at two small acquisitions, there are two challenges. One is that business integration. What are they currently working on? Which means that technology, the vertical, and the client that they operate with. And also, people integration, which is the cultural integration. But that's a different organization. Every organization has a unique culture. I'm sure that this institute has a unique culture, as opposed to another institute which is 10 kilometers away from this place. So you will have to try and integrate these two cultures, these two businesses. Huge amount of challenge. Many a times it failed. Many a times, merger and acquisition, the culture and business integrations have failed. So you need to be extremely careful, and therefore you will have to do a lot of deep dive, figure out, and making sure that there is some amount of integration. It may not happen in the first 6 months, but at least we should put a fairly reasonable time frame, 12 months, 24 months, whatever it takes to. Innovation and learning, and if you're not very innovative, you're absolutely not in the game. You need to consistently and continuously learn, innovate, look at new things, look at new products, look at new service lines, look at new clients as well. So important for you to stay in the business. With that, I think my presentation is over. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Before that, the last theme that we are currently driving is to look at two things. One is business building, the other one is organization building. In business building, we are talking about integrity and excellence. We are talking about integrity and excellence in all that we do. So therefore, 3 by 3 by 3, focus, CAM accounts, clear client identification, the GOs that we want to work on, clearly that is business building. Organization building, we want to be very transparent and consistent. We don't want to give wrong messages. We want to be very open in our communication. We want to be very transparent. And we also want to be very consistent across GOs. What we do in Malaysia, we cannot do differently in Hyderabad or in Noida. So we want to bring in some consistency across. These two are the themes that we are driving. In the open communication, we've got open houses, we've got CEO's desk, we've got leaders speak, and then we have in-house magazine. There are multiple channels of communicating to employees, but we want every stakeholder to know what we are doing and where we are heading towards. Thank you very much, ladies.